missed. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and particularly those of whom are working after hours or well before open business hours. Looking at you, Lorraine, thank you so much. Just if we can go on to the next slide there, please, Neil. Just a reminder for those of whom I haven't met or haven't seen recently, my name is Hannah Caneen. I am a principal manager at Forum, predominantly focusing on food and fibre value chains and working with businesses on alike topics. I've also had the great privilege of being the project lead and then latterly the project director of this program after predecessor Charlene Collison left Forum late last year, but she does send her best. I'm joined today by my colleague Neil, who I'll let introduce himself.
Hi everyone, Neil Walker here. I'm one of the project managers for Cotton 2040, working with Hannah, working on one of the work streams in building the uptake of sustainable cotton, and also working across a range of value chains projects at Forum too. So yeah, pleasure to be here. Great to see everyone. Thanks.
We're also joined by our fantastic colleague Bhairavi, who's joining us from India, and Annabelle, who's joining us from our UK office. And they'll be supporting us during the breakout sessions later on, so you'll hear them speak as a part of that, I'm sure. Great, so I'm sure all of you have read the email. You're cognizant that we're here today to mark the closing of the Cotton 2040 initiative. This is a program that many of you will be aware has been, as an integral sort of components of this initiative, has been running for around 7 years, with the last phase of the program known as phase 4 running for the past 3 years. So our approach to share some of these overall reflections on the work and the milestones that we've covered, just on to the next slide there now, of the program, is to kind of dive into the, I guess, some of the overall reflections of the work and the milestones that we've covered across the program, so across the last 7 years, and then we'll dig in a little bit further into the past phase, so the activities and the milestones that we've reached, particularly in the last 3 years, and I guess what our closing hopes are as a part of that, and also where you can find those activities, reports, insights on an ongoing basis after project closure. Towards the end there, we'll head into a breakout session, as we tend to do at Forum, and we'd like to broaden out the conversation a bit with you, to hear back on what you're now seeing in the cotton industry, because obviously we've gone through lots of different evolutions as part of this program, and that will continue to be the case, I'm sure. So we're interested to see what you're hearing in cotton, and then perhaps also textiles more broadly as well. So with no further ado, let's kick this off with a little positive steer from you as guided by Neil.
Muted, still always getting that wrong. Thanks, Hannah. And yeah, thought we could kick this off by really trying to think about, getting into the headspace of thinking about change. And so you can see it in front of you, kind of where are we seeing or finding transformation or optimism in the cotton industry. You're welcome to pop a sentence into the chat. You're also welcome to come off mute and share if you'd like. For me personally, I think what I'm really enjoying seeing and I think is fantastic is this increasing focus on collaboration and really a willingness to innovate. I think, everyone on the call will know better than I guess, some of the issues that the apparel or cotton industry has had historically, but there really seems to be a sense of movement, of kind of experimentation and a sense of, trying to work together to unlock, kind of how we can move forward and really build that kind of future fit, climate resilient cotton industry. I wonder if anyone else has any other thoughts that they might volunteer about where they're finding transformation. And if you're really shy, I might pick on you, so don't hide away. Nicola, I'm sorry we work too closely together for me to let you off. why don't you, where are you seeing transformation or optimism in the cotton industry?
Yeah, sure. I did have my finger on the unmute button just as you said that, Neil. I would say in terms of transformation, definitely traceability in supply chains is something that we discussed a lot with brands who were part of the Cotton 2040 programme. It's something that is a sort of an ongoing theme with clients that we're working with at Anthesis. And I think it is, there's huge transformation going on. So brands trying to understand where their cotton's coming from through the supply chain for sort of regulatory reasons, as well as sort of carbon accounting, excuse me, and sort of mitigating greenwashing claims and that sort of thing. So I think in terms of optimism, there is optimism there. I think going back to your point, Neil, in terms of collaboration, I think there's loads of opportunity there for brands to start understanding where their cotton comes from. And having those meaningful relationships, which is really key to sort of driving change, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Nicola. I think that's really valuable. Agnieszka, you shared something with us. Oh, somebody's got a hand up. Right, please go ahead.
Oh, I would just say I'd share that optimism. And I believe that the kind of climate, if I use that word, pun intended, around taking action, we've got more brands that are, used to, we had to really knock on doors and say, hey, brand, you need to have a cotton strategy, a fiber strategy that works. Now people are knocking on doors saying we need help with our fiber strategy. And we're seeing more engagement, like you say, on traceability. We're seeing more engagement on where some good programs where they can invest. We're actually seeing more investments going into on-farm, programs that are working directly on farm. So I think that there's optimism that there's a level of engagement that we haven't had before. And I think that's, partly because, we're here getting visibility, but there's also more pressure, legislation, the climate challenges and pledges and things like that. So I think now's the time to really drive momentum and offer solutions. We have proven solutions. Now it's time to make sure that people are aware and getting them engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point you made about momentum, I think, is absolutely spot on. It's like we're now talking about it. There are solutions out there, so now let's pick it up and really start running with it. Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah. Any other reflections, Agnieszka? I was going to call upon you with the work that you shared with us very recently. Perhaps you can speak to that.
Yes, of course. I was just about to type, but I'm more than happy to speak. For me, the optimism I see is actually seeing that there's more brands and retailers that really would like to not only get to know their supply chain. This is something what Lorraine and Nicola said about traceability, but also they really, really would like to tackle the climate change issues, which are visible in the supply chain, whether it's to increase the number of the farmers they work with, they want to go for the bigger projects, or maybe they want to change how they work with the implementing partners. So maybe they want to go into more organic programs or the regenerative. So there's more solution for them, but it's very positive for me to see that the brands really want to use the solutions that the service providers are offering to them.
Absolutely, and it's great to see that kind of, I think, that alignment about where we're seeing that transformation and that optimism. I think that's really key, and it's good that we're all kind of, we're all sensing a similar thing. All right, we'll leave that there for now, and there'll be opportunities to share more about kind of where we're seeing transformation later. But for now, I'll hand it back to Hannah. Back to you, Hannah.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, and thanks to those of who shared some of their insights and thoughts. It's I have to say, it's like, it feels really energizing to be closing the program at this moment. One, because there's so much more to do, but there's so much momentum, there's so much traction and buy-in, as Lorraine said. So I think it's actually the prospects for cotton and textiles more broadly is it's a really exciting time to be a part of this conversation. So now that we've had sort of an overview of where we might go and what we have to look forward to and achieving collectively, I just want to mirror this moment, I guess, and run through a little overview of where we've been and how Cotton 2040 sort of came to be and kicked off. And I guess thank you on the way with some of you who have been with us since the beginning as well, because I think it's really important to acknowledge your inputs over the years. So we'll start it down in this bottom left-hand corner. Our first, I guess, major milestone, if you will, happened about 7 years ago when Forum produced a piece of work called The Future of Fashion Scenarios. And this was developed, and then it was a sort of a synthesis of trends across the fashion industry. And it detailed some of the potential scenarios in which the fashion industry may find itself in. And looking back on them now, it's fascinating because it certainly included some of the experiences that have certainly come to be, have been realized. So, it had highlighted some of the raw material production challenges that have come to pass, some of the supply chain complexities, increasing complexities, and opaqueness, I suppose, and volatility in supply chains. And of course, the rising need for ESG, as well as some of the kind of more high level operational and of course the ecological challenges that have certainly come to pass. I will say the pandemic was not included as a part of that. It was not foreseen. So just to say too, obviously there's always these sort of compounding kind of curveballs that we experience in life and in industry as well. And I guess just highlights even more the need to create, further visibility and collective action to create resilience as well. So it was through this process and kicking off these conversations and scenarios with support from the Lades Foundation that we developed the concept for a potential multi-stakeholder, multi-year initiative. And that was to focus on the key concerns and gaps that we saw specific to the cotton sector, which then came to be known as Cotton 2040. So the ideas that we'd sort of prized out relating to cotton specifically were then workshopped with a lot of you who are on the call today and some of your colleagues. And we brought together, fashion, retail and sustainable standard stakeholders. And the idea was, that we would then collectively endeavour to drive a mindset and a shared action based on the needs that we were hearing predominantly from you. And that we would set ourselves a very ambitious target of stretching to really move the needle on action and communication within the industry by 2040. So of course we needed to be a little bit more specific than that. And so we decided that we would channel these key areas of action through 3 key work streams, which came to be known first as building the case for climate adaptation in cotton. Secondly, the driving further commitments to the procurement and support of sustainable cotton. And then finally, transforming the business model of cotton. So we found through conversation with a lot of you and at the production end that the business model that underpinned the sector was not working in the interest of creating a fair and resilient industry. Again, this was done with the support of all of you, and the list is so long. I would be here until for the next hour talking about everybody, but essentially this was with the insight of over 100 stakeholders across 60 different organisations, and many of them have since gone on to be partners and co-deliver on the goals of the project. I do want to call out the sort of 3 key technical partners that we've had. We had Willis Towers, Acclimatise, which latterly became known as Willis Towers Watson or WTW, and Thesis and the World Resources Institute as well, who were exemplary and integral in a part of developing these concepts. And then, of course, the working group. I just want to say your valuable inputs over the years cannot be overstated. So then we had our kind of framework, we had our ambition, and then we had to start producing some work. And it was at this point that we were beginning to see and acknowledge that it was a bit of a wild west out there for cotton actors across the board, and that there was a real difficulty in agreeing and aligning on what even sustainable cotton actually means. And then I guess who or what organisations or standards were available to procure through and align with, as well as the different sort of unique offers and points of difference between them. And this might sound, just as a bit of a foreshadow of things to come, this might sound similar perhaps to the conversation we're having now around organic and regenerative cotton. So I think this sets a really nice pathway of the fact that we can achieve shared language and dialogue and understanding around what is and isn't sort of exemplary, regenerative, organic or sustainable cotton. So through this program, we created a first output, and we spearheaded a standard agnostic guide, which I believe was available or is available in 3 different languages, in German, English and Japanese. And the idea was that this would support brands, this framework, support brands and retailers on their journey to procuring sustainable cotton. And this was built off the back of many of the different cotton standards that are out there today, and as they were formulating a lot of their own, I guess, the protocols that underpinned their standards as well. Fortunately, as a part of our closing strategy, the Textile Exchange team have very kindly agreed to now host this. So that guide will live on. So please do keep referring to it in conversations as useful to you. Next up, we had the Delta framework. So we worked with the Delta team, as well as working closely with ICAC, ICAC, BCI, now known as Better Cotton, and ICO, amongst many others. And we agreed on a common set of impact indicators to really align what sustainability meant in terms of reporting standards. And we looked at that in terms of both cotton, and we fed into that a little in terms of coffee as well. Again, a bit of a foreshadow, I think, of perhaps some areas that we as an industry might look at in the future as well, learning across food and fibre. This remains on the Delta website, and knowledge continues to exist within the organisation. So again, please feel free to keep referring to that as useful. Right, and now we're into phase 4, and it's just been a real hum of just a hub of activity. It's really been humming the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, which Neil and myself have had the great privilege to be a part of. But just to sort of, I guess, pull out some of the real great successes and I guess sort of more public successes from that phase, we would have to identify the climate risk reports and tools that we produced along with our partners at WTW. This was a world first in terms of the analysis of cotton, global cotton climate risks, and detailed a lot of the different cotton producing regions, some of the production realities that they were facing based on climate hazards. And we produced 2 reports, a global report and an India-specific report, as well as a risk exploratory tool that you can use to really identify what regions are most vulnerable to certain risks. This has been very well received. I want to be humble in how far we've gone with this, but I also want to really highlight how well received this has been in the media and is frequently referred to in lots of different, reports across the world. And we were actually just picked up a couple of weeks ago and referred to in the New York Times. So I would say that was a bit of a professional high for us at Forum. And again, huge thanks to everyone for their input, and particularly Erin and the WTW team, because that was a huge amount of work. So thank you. So where does that lead us? You see the little arrow up the top. We do well, as I mentioned, we are largely closing down the program, and this is just coming to a natural close as you know, many of the industry leaders step into this space, and we continue to focus on other areas of activation. However, we're halfway through the growing season in the US, and we do have a US-based regenerative cotton growing project that continues, a pilot there. So I'll provide a bit more information on that in a moment, but just to say that that will continue. And then, of course, as I said, the action continues with all of you as well. The industry is obviously now much better versed and well placed, and I have no doubt that you'll keep momentum on the social and environmental targets that we need to reach. So on our next slide, as I said, I just wanted to jump down briefly into, you know, some of the works that we've produced in the last phase, and particularly in the last year of this phase, so across 2022 and into this year as well. As I said, we've got these 3 work streams which have continued to kind of be the guide rails for our work and activities. In the first work stream, the climate adaptation work stream, in November, Forum and WTW's Climate and Resilience Hub delivered a series of 6 very practical, actionable masterclasses, and these outlined the climate crisis and how that is likely to impact cotton and the key stakeholders that exist within the cotton industry, specifically sort of brands and retailers, but we did have actors present from across the value chain. And we touched on a bunch of sort of key topics that we thought were sort of most pertinent to cotton procurers, whilst really amplifying, I guess, some of the struggles that are being faced at the production end as well. So these 6 focal areas were commodities and supply chain risk, transition risk and decarbonisation, liability, governance and people, insurance, giving it a bit of a WTW flavour there, and lastly, but certainly not least, social value and community vulnerability. So just to say, all the videos are available online. You can find it on WTW's website. You can also find it on Forum's YouTube for Cotton 2040. And there are many different blogs that exist out there that are sort of highlight, I guess, the key actions and opportunities for impacts, where the sector we think is still falling a bit short. And that was, again, those insights were guided by industry leaders as well. I will jump very quickly into workstream 3 because that's something that I oversaw. So in the last year, it's been an incredible time for the transformative business models workstream. Forum has developed and convened stakeholders across the US to pilot, we think, a really cool opportunity to transition from conventional cotton growing to regenerative production practices. And so with our partners, the Ecosystem Services Market Consortia, ESMC, and the US Cotton Trust Protocol, we have developed an on-the-farm, farmer-facing pilot, which is a first for Forum, to collaborate and test and explore how ecosystems, services, markets might mutually benefit and support farmers, I guess, through right from the production end, but hopefully through the entire local supply shed, and then hopefully the industry, and moving beyond conventional but to regenerative and replenishing characteristics. And I guess the driver here has really been about focusing on the production end and making sure that farmers are incentivized and also rewarded for changing their behaviours in order to support the wider industry, as I said. So we have just over 2,300 acres currently participating in the pilot this growing season that is active across 4 states. And we have cover crops that was put in the ground some time ago, and there's a baselining has been undertaken, and we now have cotton in the ground. So we're really excited to kind of be learning closer to the production end, but also with, you know, lots of different very active partners in the space. I will say too, as a part of this process, we had to develop a full sort of completely new set of cotton specific regenerative protocols that have been created, I guess, in order to monitor and verify those practice changes. And carbon credits will be produced at the end as a result of this, but there are also biodiversity protocols that are a central part of this. And that has been with the support of others who have now started working in this space as well. Textile Exchange, of course, they produced a really exciting landscape analysis late last year, and we've been working together to really share and connect on our findings as well. And all of those will be made available to you in due course as those lessons are generated. We really want this to be something that you can pick up and scale as an industry. I guess a final little ask as a part of this pilot design is that whilst we have a really exciting constellation of partners and learning partners across the industry as a part of this, we're still looking for some keen cotton procurers to get involved and support the pilot by purchasing the regenerative cotton from the US supply shed, but also the carbon credits that will be generated from the pilot as well. So look, get in touch with us about it, and it'd be good to have a conversation about that offline. Neil, do you want to speak to the building uptake piece?
Absolutely, thanks, Hannah. Like Hannah said, there's been just a ton of activity happening throughout phase 4 of the project, of the initiative, and no more so than in the work stream working on the building uptake of procurement of sustainable cotton. And yeah, I'm pleased to see both Holly and Nicola on the call today. We've been partnering with Anthesis to do this over the last 3 years, and really in this work stream centered around working directly with a learning cohort of 11 brands who are all across the world, in different size of company, different kind of consumers of focus, different geographies, like I said, and really different stages of their sustainable journey. However, all of them were kind of asking this question of how do we increase our procurement of sustainable cotton? What are the challenges we might face? What are some of the places that we can look? What are some of the stones we can turn over to find kind of the answers here? And we've been working with them for 3 years through kind of a learning platform in which we did kind of direct capacity building and supporting them in improving their knowledge and what, you know, their kind of what's out there. And really also in providing a place for kind of sharing and collaboration. And what this is probably something that reflecting on the work stream has really been a really interesting find and quite like a less tangible outcome, but a really valuable one, which is that the brands themselves have found it incredibly rewarding to have a space to speak to the challenges that they're facing in increasing sustainable procurement or procurement of sustainable cotton, and really kind of be in a space where they can speak to their peers about these common challenges and even at times kind of work to overcome them. And through this work stream, we've also been kind of continuing to democratize and share knowledge around sustainably produced cotton through the Cotton Up Guide and maintaining that, and also through exploring other models. So things like looking at traceability, which is something Nicola mentioned, was something that we explored, and really understanding kind of how we might approach this kind of really burgeoning area of focus now. In year 3, we've been primarily focused on completing the kind of remaining activities with those brands around improving their awareness and sharing about what's out there and what the future might hold. So we're completing those kind of capacity building activities. We've also been exploring, like I said, that traceability element. So we worked with a platform that supported kind of supply chain transparency and looked to share that with our partners. And then also kind of doing a number of closing activities. So at the beginning of the work stream, we did a baselining of the levels or the volumes that these brands were procuring sustainably produced cotton or certified sustainably produced cotton. And now we are doing the end line, so evaluating kind of how far that progress, how far they've come, what progress they've made. as well as doing a series of interviews with those participating brands, which has been absolutely fascinating, and just seeing kind of what people have been, how individuals within these organizations and the organizations themselves, how those ambitions have shifted, how they now consider their role within the system, and you're really thinking about kind of what the future can be, and also really, I feel like, facing kind of challenges that are really significant and will take that kind of collaboration and momentum that we spoke about earlier to overcome. So it really does feel like, I kind of said, like a really kind of a really significant departure for the initiative, but also there's just so much going on that people are really looking for answers, and I think that's really positive. I will move on now because it's my responsibility and my pleasure to introduce to you a little exercise for you all. So this breakout exercise is really about trying to, well, the Cotton in 2040 initiative is ending, and we hope for our part, like we've been talking about, that we have been part of this kind of supporting the shift to a sustainable, resilient, climate resilient cotton industry. But to finish this, what we would like to do is really think about, where are we seeing change? What does that change look like? Where is it happening within the system? Who's doing it? And how significant is it? And to help us do this, and bear with me, I promise this will be fun. To help us do this, we'll be employing what FSG have described as systems change conditions, and there's 6 of them. I should say this comes from the 2018 publication, The Water of Systems Change, which is a fascinating read and a really useful tool when we're thinking about what might be necessary for the system to change, and what those, and kind of categorizing those conditions. And you can see them in front of you, and I don't think anyone on the call will be significantly shocked by any of this. So yeah, what we have here is kind of policies. So these are kind of the government, institutional, organizational rules that guide entities' actions and others' actions. There are the practices, so there's activities of institutions, coalitions, networks, really around kind of social and environmental progress, but they can also be within the entity, and the things that kind of comprise their work. We have resource flows, so how money, people, knowledge, etc., all are allocated and distributed. Relationships and connections, so those kind of the quality of connections occurring between actors in the system, and really particularly those with like really significantly different histories and viewpoints, and the kind of clash of those. Power dynamics, which is self-explanatory, but I think we all know the kind of the challenges in the distribution of decision-making power. And then finally, and perhaps more of a challenge, is that kind of the habits of thought, the mental models that we see in those deeply held beliefs and assumptions that really underpin how we all operate. What we're going to ask you to do, well, first of all, those 6 conditions can be mapped across what you might call different levels. So the first 3 are kind of explicit, right? So we can see these things, they are tangible, they're visible, they might be in documents, they might be in ledger books, they might be, really things that we can track and see change. So that's the kind of explicit structural change. Then you have the kind of relational changes. So this is kind of semi-explicit, you can see it happening in front of you perhaps, but it's less tangible. And then finally, you have that implicit transformative change. So it's really actually quite challenging to really see this shifting. You might see small signals of it. You might see kind of big events that maybe indicate towards it, but it can be quite a challenge to really kind of take stock of where we're seeing that transformative change of a mental model. And what we'll do in this exercise is really come together and try and think about where we are seeing change and map it against these 3 areas, whilst asking ourselves the question, is this significant? This is a significant shift. Is that really kind of changing is that really shifting the dial? Or is it incremental? Is it just tweaking the system? Is it business as usual, perhaps with some sustainable changes here and there? Or is it actually resisting change? Is it kind of business as usual with no change, or is it even regressing? So don't be too worried. I don't think anyone in this group has anything to be worried about, but this will be an open exercise. There'll be facilitators in the meeting that you've been introduced to who will help you with thinking these things through. And there are no wrong answers. It's actually about kind of the perception of change. So without any further ado, and like I said, you will have facilitators in the room who will can help you with this. Yeah, Hannah, do you want to go before we start?
I'm just doing a numbers check. I'm wondering whether we do need to be in 2 groups at all. I'm happy to take your lead.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we can return to plenary if it gets quiet. All right, great. Well, without any further ado, we're going to shift off. Please, everybody, videos on, smiles on, and be really, I think it will be a really fun exercise. And just to say as well, this information will not be going, into the void. We're really hoping to kind of be able to package this up and use it as part of our learnings, but also sharing back to the sector about where that change is happening. So it is important sometimes to take stock of in this moment of momentum, of change, of collaboration, of new models, of solutions, etc. I think it will be a good exercise to really take stock of that. So I will get you into your breakout rooms and I'll see you in there. Everyone, well, hope everybody enjoyed that session. It was certainly really interesting for me, and my group our group had a really, really fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed it. I'm just going to invite my colleagues who are very kindly supporting us in this to feedback. So Bhairavi, in just a couple of minutes, what was coming up for your group?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So I think our group, we were talking quite a bit about the policies. So I think so far it was felt that the Farm Bill in the US hasn't been up to the mark, but in the current iteration, there are some introductions of regen ag and other, there are some promising aspects to the Farm Bill US that we're hoping for. In the US, in Europe, though, there have been some due diligence laws which are making brands think a little more about their supply chain and sourcing. But then there was also the darker side of it, which is there's a lot of pushback happening from brands and retailers about this. I think these aspects about the policies were greatly discussed. About regenerative agriculture and the change that needs to happen, I think there were some concerns that we're very slow in incorporating certain methods and that we might be missing the 1.5 degree target that we have. On the other hand, even though there are things like regen ag can be used and showcased positively while reporting for GHG emissions, but still there are some hit and miss when it comes to brands actually implementing this. And I think there was one one more barrier, which was that when brands and retailers need to look at the social as well as ecological aspects, sometimes the social aspects aren't monitored or implemented as well because it's tougher to quantify those. And then we also spoke a little bit about the relationships and power dynamics. And an interesting thing that came up was that we need to also look at the colonialism and reparations, like in terms of loss and damage, that need to be recognized, but it's happening very slowly. And that personally for me was quite fascinating. But on the other hand, there's some hope. There's some work in the Farm Bill US where they're trying to also include underprivileged farmers and cater to them. Similarly, there are some grants opening up in the US for farmers who are from the underrepresented sector. However, there are not enough government dollars or priority or new money being invested in farms. So these were some of the main things that came up. We didn't focus too much on mental models, but this was what came up. And one very interesting, another barrier which doesn't seem related to agriculture, but is that the geopolitical issues and cycles like the Ukraine war, etc., are also posing barriers to advancing positively in this field. So,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, much like we mentioned with regards to COVID disrupting or coming in as it did for all of us. Sometimes with all the best will in the world, these things can be disrupted massively by extraneous factors. Mo, would you like to come in and share a little bit from our group?
Sure. Thank you, Neil. So I'll just go left to right. We started with the structural change, and also in our group, there's some big sort of institutional legislation that's coming through, like the EU Green Deal and the New York Due Diligence Act, which is expected to drive really significant change just because of the the strength of the people that are pushing that legislation through. More change around this kind of sort of policy and legislation. There's definitely a shift towards transparency through it, and it was mentioned about greenwashing becoming now a sort of a double-edged sword. There's pressures on both sides, not only from the consumer sides, which would be a sort of embarrassment, a reputational loss for the brands, but also there's now a sort of operational and legal risk from not following through on your sustainability targets. But there was the main resistance barriers for change in this were sort of the legacy of pre-COVID, basically the retention of some top-down approaches. Lots of people were struggling with budget constraints, especially after COVID, but also from the business model before, not having enough depth to really tackle sustainability within cotton supply chains, you know, to an appropriate amount. And that was sort of reflected in a best practice not yet being unanimously agreed. There were still technical barriers, which could have been through lack of investment. In terms of relational change, there was some interesting strong change with brands, especially if they continue on the path that they're taking, on forging, you know, deep relationships throughout the supply chain. So not just their direct suppliers, but their suppliers, the suppliers of the suppliers are really going through that value network. Key systemic issues could be really uprooted and solved. However, lots of businesses are still finding their supply chains opaque. Lots of them simply just don't know their supply chains, and many are also facing resistance collaboration between brands. And also on the other end of the scale, small scale farmers don't really have enough of a platform, and often seen as, whilst central to the system, not having an outsourced, sort of a bit behind the discourse. And in transformative mental model, so we actually discovered a couple of new signals. So there's definitely been a rise in consumer platforms for sort of reusable clothing, recyclable clothing, and really sort of, getting those platforms that consumers can engage in are becoming much more mainstream. And it's, I'll be quick. But there was a problem in sort of the rate of change being overwhelming to farmers and also to brands as well.
Yeah, that overwhelm was a key point that came up. Thanks so much, Bhairavi and Annabelle. Holly, I believe that you would like to come in, if so, as you always are.
Oh, yes. So one of the things that we were talking about was kind of, you know, things that would negatively, you know, maybe negative consequences of positive decisions. So this idea of the Science-Based Targets Initiative introducing flag targets, it sounds like a very good idea in principle. However, for apparel brands, the level of flag within your business is quite small in comparison to everything else. And we're finding that the brands that we've checked so far are all very much on the borderline. And I do, especially with, you know, maybe more fast fashion brands and stuff, I do worry that they won't actually get into flag at all. So therefore they won't have to set flag targets, which would be terrible. And also they might push more synthetics within their collections to avoid having to set flag targets, because I think people aren't quite clear about what that entails and what they have to do. They just know it's something they've got to do, and that on top of their ever increasing list of things to do, like, you know, making green planes properly, for example, you know, starts to get maybe more, you know, I worry that it could have some negative implications on people using natural based fibers over time, but that's just a personal worry that, you know, wanted to put out there. But yeah, I felt like it might impact on farming and cotton in general.
Yeah, definitely, and a personal observation from a very astute observer, so very valuable. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for taking part in that. I found very rich discussions in both groups. As we wrap up now, that's a lovely slide, not yet though. I will ask Little Bora, who is the Senior Program Manager for Lardis Foundation, who are the co-funder for the project, Little has been supporting us for a number of years now and is currently the lead on regenerative agricultural production landscapes for the foundation. So Little, just a couple of minutes, if you could just reflect for us on this journey that we've been on through the Cotton 2040 initiative and perhaps what's next.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thanks, Neil. I think it has been a long journey, and I think I've only been there for, I think, half of it. So I'll try to do justice to it as much as possible, because a lot of my colleagues have also been part of this initially. So this has been really great. And I really
I've lost you here, Little. Maybe I'm lost.
No, I think there's an issue.
It's frozen.
stakeholders, and can you hear me?
We've got you back now, I think.
Hello?
You went for a moment, Little, but we've got you back now.
Ah, okay. Sorry, I don't know where you lost me, but
You were just beginning your reflections on behalf of all the colleagues who've helped us on this project.
yeah, I was just thanking everyone, all the Cotton 2040 stakeholders, for contributing for Cotton 2040, and then also Forum for the Future, WRI Antithesis, Will Stower-Watson. And, I think this has been a great journey. And also, I'd like to mention Charlene, who has been in the lead for most of it. And I have been, engaging with her. She's not here today, but, she has played a key role. I think some of the things which I feel like while we are ending this initiative here, but, a lot of these things are going to continue beyond this as well. Things like the Delta framework, which I think it was a very important initiative where, all the sustainability standards came together and aligning on impact indicators, the climate risk reports and the tools, risk reports and the tools. That's also going to be very helpful, and we can see a lot of the organizations already using it. And then I'm also very excited about the ecosystem services pilot, which is happening in US, because I think that has some lessons which we can also integrate into the landscape work which we are doing. And then even the Delta framework, I see BCI already, using it as part of their impact assessment framework. I think from the Louders Foundation perspective, we have transitioned our work from just focusing on single crop to supporting, landscape-based approaches. And then from that perspective, also this whole work around the framework and the ecosystem pilot is going to be very useful, and we'll be also closely looking at learning and learning from this. Just again, I just want to end it by thanking everyone, and I hope all the great work we have done here, we just bring on that, and we work towards making the cotton sector and the fashion sector more resilient. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Little, and yeah, I share those well wishes. I will also invite Lorraine to step up, and for those who weren't here when she joined, I think it's now 6 in the morning for Lorraine.
That's
so
right, and I'm on my
becoming a bit more of a human hour. But Lorraine, if I can invite you as well, Lorraine Pepper, catalyst and co-founder of Textile Exchange. I'm sure no stranger to anyone on the call, but I've been a really strong partner and friend to the Cotton 2040 initiative, and
Absolutely.
yeah, just invite you to do the same.
Yeah, and it's like really exciting. I was there at the very beginning of this, and so it's really been exciting to see the journey of separate, disparate projects and programs. There was a lot of competition among the programs, but really uniting under an umbrella of we're all here to accomplish good things, and this is more of a journey, and that there's value across the board on everything that's going on. So it's really changed the approach of a journey to more sustainable and now more regenerative and organic practices. So it's kind of in that compass. And so it's really turned into a journey piece. So there's greater collaboration across all of the organic cotton programs and cotton programs. And there's a proliferation. There's more, not just the big ones, the global ones, but there's more programs just going like crazy, and regenerative is certainly part of that work, that we're not using the word sustainable anymore. Of course, organic is clearly defined, but there's this big new kind of regenerative space. And quite frankly, that's where we've been able to literally find some common ground, that while we might not agree on GMOs and we might not agree on insecticide control, we can agree on investing in soils and eliminating synthetic fertilizers and really building healthy soils. And so that's given us some common ground literally to work on. We're excited about where we are on kind of taking the torch from all the great work that's been done. You mentioned earlier that we're going to be taking the Cotton Up Guide and it's getting transferred over. It'll get a facelift, update, lift, and all the initiatives will be involved in that. And we'll start including some of the newer programs and projects that are there as well to make that more of a, a broader resource that's available, and some case studies. So our comms and cotton folks in the team are really looking at how do we take it to the next place. We have embarked last year and a very deliberate, and this is part of my new role, Simon, it's a crack up because I'm no longer CEO. I'm this catalyst and co-founder now. So it's really getting back in the trenches. And one of the big things is to work with initially all of our members to make sure they do have a fiber strategy, and that a strong cotton strategy is a part of that. And so we're literally knocking doors and and setting up workshops, and I'm on calls, 2 or 3 calls every day, just on fiber strategies. And people are really starting to step up. You're right. We've got to push hard in order. We're not going to meet that 1.5 if we don't accelerate the adoption of preferred fibers. Of course, cotton is a cornerstone. So we've got a very robust outreach program of getting people on board for more aggressive, and that's the word we're using, aggressive strategy to happen on all the key fibers. Oh, and I should mention as well, we are change within, change without. We are also investing quite a bit, and there's been a joint task force between several stakeholder initiatives. I know Jesse Daystar is on there representing Cotton Inc. and others, but we've been working with Sustainable Apparel Coalition to really get them to relook what is the methodology around some of the LCAs. And this year, well, actually 2022, Textile Exchange invested that same stakeholder review process with all the animal fibers. There's going to be new LCAs that go with that LCA plus attitude of it's more than the LCAs. It's got to be those other things. So it's LC life cycle analysis plus life cycle inventories to pull better information, because quite frankly, it's damned if we do and damned if we don't. There's going to LCAs and LCIs will be used. And so it's like, how do we make sure that that information is more robust and accurate? And that same conversation is happening on what the methodologies are going to be for cotton. And this year we have budget to update both cotton and polyester. So cotton methodologies and new LCAs and LCIs for cotton are in the works.
You must be very busy. But it's fascinating to see, and I think it's a really good call out as well. Like, well, whilst this project is focused on cotton, there are the range of materials that we need to work with is broad, and there needs to be concerted action, and that begins by understanding and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how we can assess those and the impact of those, and then really, working together to find those solutions. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing, and it was a pleasure to have you to work with you as part of this initiative throughout. Hannah, I'll hand back over to you to close, I believe.
Yeah, just thank you so much, everybody. And Loraya, I'm not at all surprised to hear that it sounds like everyone's bitten off far more than they probably have good rights to chew through. But I have no doubt that if anyone will and do it successfully, it will be you folks. So I'm really looking forward to following all of that. And I'm sure others are on the call as well. So just before we close up, I just wanted to pivot very slightly just to highlight to you all that Forum, as a part of its new 3-year strategy, we are now focusing on 3 key sort of areas of activities and action. I'll start with the one in the middle there. So this will be to focus on the much needed energy transition that, we're facing a pretty global crisis here, so we'll be really focusing on how we bring regenerative mindsets and principles and justice to this energy transition. We will be working on purpose of business, so really catalyzing change through building more ambitious mindsets with businesses and business leaders. And I guess that's really in recognition of the significant leverage that we all know that they have, and really, I guess, create more emphasis on the need for higher, better targets that improve equity and sustainability actions and accountability across various markets. That very much includes textiles industries and of course cotton. And then finally, back to this first one here as well, we'll continue to have a global sort of reaching focus on food and food systems, as well as the value chains and the business models that underpins them. So we see this as being, I guess, as a real sort of key area of focus that will continue to also, I guess, have intersections with the fibre landscapes as well, and textiles supply chains, particularly in some of our other geographies, such as the Asia Pacific region that we work in. And we've already begun to identify many opportunities in which food and fibre can work more closely together and learn from one another. That's starting to happen in our cotton pilot in the US. There's some discussions happening in India around how these two kind of very siloed industries can better benchmark and talk to each other, because of course at the production level, farmers are growing fibre and food. So do reach out if you've got any thoughts or ideas, or you're just kind of interested to throw some, concepts around with us. We're very much in sort of the experimental phase of this part of the strategy. And as ever, our doors remain very much open to discuss these ideas, and particularly with you all, because there's such a depth of insight and intelligence in this room. So you know where to find us. So this very sadly concludes our final working group meeting for Cotton 2040. Thank you, Lades Foundation. Thank you, partners. It's been so wonderful to learn from you all and, of course, work alongside you in producing such well-received and valuable outputs. I'm just going to say we were in the New York Times again, which is amazing. It's been a real pleasure. I'm really grateful. We're all really grateful for your time and support and insight that you've shared with us over the past 7 years. And of course, I don't speak for the broader cotton sector by any means, but I know every time that we talk about Cotton 2040 with a new actor, people are aware of our initiative, and that's been because of you as well. One thing I'm certainly aware of since working with you all for the past 18 months, that has been how open most people are to sharing their reflections and spurring collective action. So I've been really humbled to have a seat in the room full of so much energy and aspiration. So I'm really looking forward to our ongoing journey together as we accelerate to a more socially just and replenishing cotton sector. So thank you again, and look forward to our ongoing communications.